Yeah, it was good. It was, yeah, it was really good. I was really happy that we were able to do it, and especially happy that the students afterwards came up to me and said, boy, this is what we really needed. This is what we've been dying to get. This has been so helpful, and so that's great. That's the whole idea. So, ready to start? I'm on? Okay, great. Well, I was looking for a definition of solidarity. And first of all, hang in there with me. I haven't had a lot of time to do a lot of preparation, so a lot of this is going to be coming out of my own experience, and I'll have to refer to notes. But I was looking for a definition of solidarity, and one that I really resonated with was a definition by Gustavo Gutierrez, who's considered to be the father of Latin American liberation theology. And he writes, "There is no true commitment to solidarity with the poor if one sees them merely as people passively waiting for help. Respecting their status as those who control their own destiny is an indispensable condition for genuine solidarity. For that reason, the goal is not to become, except in cases of extreme urgency or short duration, the voice of the voiceless." Now, we all want to be the voice of the voiceless, and Gustavo says that's not what we should be aiming for. He says, as is sometimes said, undoubtedly with the best intentions, but rather in some way to help ensure that those without a voice find one. Being an agent of one's own history is for all people an expression of freedom and dignity, the starting point and source of authentic human development. And that, for me, says it all. Not being the voice of the voiceless, but in some way strengthening the capacity of those who have been deprived of their voice to find their own voice and to act and speak in their own name. So what I'd like to do is, when I met earlier in the week with some of your team leaders, I guess to share some of my own story and give you some of the principles behind an organization that I was a part of for about 12 years. So the story that I'm going to share is the story of Philadelphia Interfaith Action and my work with them. I guess it was my experience in what it means to be in solidarity with this organization. So I should say that I joined Villanova. Actually, I started at Villanova in 1970. You weren't even thought of. In 1976, I came on as a part-time teacher in the Theology and Religious Studies department. And then by 78, I was offered a full-time job in the department. And I just had finished my dissertation. Actually, I defended my dissertation the day before I started teaching full-time here at Villanova. When I was hired full-time, the committee that hired me, the chair of the committee, said to me, you have to have your dissertation finished and completed before you start teaching. So I do everything. You know, I always complain about my students who do things last minute. I really can't complain because I do it last minute as well. So I defended my dissertation the day before I started teaching, and I remember walking into my first class and saying, oh man, I am in trouble. I don't know the name of this course. I have no idea what I'm teaching. All I know is I'm here. But I did my dissertation on world hunger, and it was on the responsibility of education, and in particular Christian education, to address the problem of world hunger. So I guess when I came to Villanova, I really did feel that I was one of the leading experts on world hunger in the country, and I do think I was at the time. By the time I finished my dissertation, I already had a book contract to have the book published. The book itself won the prize for the best book of the year with the College Theology Society. I was getting a lot of requests for lectures around the country. It was a heady experience, and I really said, my name's going to be up in lights. And I was, you know, the way a lot of young faculty here, they really want to make a name for themselves. They want to impact the profession. My second book was a book on justice in education. And that book took a long time to write. You know, I'm not going to tell you how long because it's really embarrassing. But it really, you know, when I started writing it to when I concluded it, I really went through, I think, a major change in my own thinking about my work and what really mattered and where I was really needed and where I wanted to spend my time. And over that period of 78 till when it was finally published, I encountered the writing of John Sobrino, who was a Jesuit in El Salvador, still in El Salvador, and Father Ignacio Ellacuría, one of the Jesuits who was murdered, who was the president of the University of Central America in El Salvador, and he was murdered because he was using his leadership to move the university to adopt a preferential option for the poor and be a real player in bringing an end to the civil war in El Salvador and furthering justice in El Salvador. So to start the story, I really wanted to know, for my second book, I really wanted to know where is the church working for change and how is it able to affect change? And I didn't want to know anything about, on the national level. I wasn't interested in the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops or the U.S. Catholic Campaign for Human Development. I really wanted to know on the grassroots level, concretely, where is the church making a difference, particularly in the inner city? And I have a very good friend. His name's Father John McNamee. I knew him since I was 18. He married my husband and me, baptized my kids, buried my parents, the whole works. And he was a pastor at St. Malachy's Church in inner city Philadelphia. It's right near Temple University. So I called him up one day and said, Jack, I said, this is a research area I'm interested in. And I explained to him, and he said, well, you're in luck. I'm always in luck, right? Always in luck. We're just starting this new organization in Philadelphia, and why don't you come down and sit in on some of them? I'm sure they'd be so happy to meet you and hear what you're interested in. You could attend the meetings and blah, blah, blah. Well, they weren't happy that I came down. And I was looked at as someone who was intruding. And then, of course, I was really pretty aggressive, and I said, well, I know you're starting this organization, and I'm going to be doing a lot of interviews, but I'd really like to go through the training that the Industrial Areas Foundation has for community leaders. Could I go through the training? And then they gave me a hard time and said, we don't want you in the training, that the training is for people in the community, leaders in the community. You would be a distraction. And then I said, well, is this a matter of cost? Well, to make a long story short, they finally let me go through the training. So I'm talking about the inner city. There were a number of inner city pastors in Philadelphia. They were Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian, Independent Baptist, some Jewish rabbis. We didn't have anyone from the Islamic faith. But they had come together. They had been meeting for a couple of months at St. Malachy's Church. And basically, they were meeting because things were getting very bad in the city. The crime was on the rise. They were finding more and more people were coming to the rectories asking for food. They were asking for rides to the emergency room. The city was becoming more and more violent. And the pastors had started soup kitchens. They had started, closed pantries. They had helped to get people jobs. And they were just finding that they were just putting their fingers in the dike. And the dike was bursting. Wherever they plugged one hole up, it was bursting all in 10 other places. And they had heard about an organization in New York City that was organizing principally in Brooklyn. And the organization was called East Brooklyn Congregations, and it was an affiliate of the Industrial Areas Foundation. So the pastors had heard about EBC and the phenomenal work that EBC was doing, and they had also heard that it was part of a network of organizations affiliated with the Industrial Areas Foundation. And so they had been meeting and they had contracted with the Industrial Areas Foundation to find out if the IAF would take them on and would help to build an organization in Philadelphia. So they had to raise a lot of money for this. Each congregation had to commit, I think pretty sure, I think the total that they had to raise was $275,000. And the Catholics had gotten a grant from the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops for $75,000. So there was money involved. Because you're basically entering into a contract with the Industrial Areas Foundation to train you to become a community organization. Okay. So part of that, becoming a part of a community organization, was going through training, leadership training. So the pastors had raised the money, and they had signed on to go through this leadership training that was taking place in Baltimore. And that's what I try to become, I try to get in on that. So, the training. So I paid, I must have paid maybe $5,000 to participate in the leadership training. And I raised it. I mean, there used to be a vice president here, an academic vice president, Larry Gallon, who's the Gallon Service Award now. And Larry liked me. I have no idea why he liked me, but I was telling Father Donahue last night at a dinner, I said, I would knock on Larry's door and he would say to me, Sue, don't even tell me, don't give me your spiel, tell me how much you want. So that was, get it out, tell me how much you're asking for. And then I would ask him, and then I would say, look, Larry, you know, I spent hours preparing my spiel, let me say it. And he would say, okay, but I'm going to give you 3 minutes and that's it. And he was phenomenal, but he would usually find the money to support whatever crazy idea I had. And this was, you know, one of the crazier ideas, but I got money from Larry to do it. And I put some of my own money in. So anyway, with the instructions, the IAF instructions, I remember clearly reading, make sure it was at a hotel near the airport. And the instructions were, we start on time and we end on time, right? And I'm driving and I'm getting lost. This was before GPS, and I'm lost, you know, really lost. And I'm wearing, it was hot, and I'm wearing shorts. So I finally get there, I run into the room, and there are all these people around, and this room, mostly people of color. And I burst in and I say hello to all of them. I'm Sue Toton, here I am, and it's like, you're late. And you're not dressed appropriately for the meeting. You're just dressed disrespectfully. So it's like, well, I can't do much about it right now. So, what I learned when I was there is that there was one group of people, and these were academics. There were a number of academics who had asked to do the same thing that I was asking. And basically, this was one of the ways that the IAF was going to support this training for the leaders from the local congregations. So the academics were in the other room, and I was in the room with all of the, you know, very poor people, people of color, cross denominations, and me. And so the training was 10 days. And in the very beginning of the training, I think what was annoying to me was the people in the other room, the academics, they seemed to be laughing a lot. There was a lot of noise coming out of there. And in my room, there was much more serious conversation going on. And I kept saying to myself, I want to be with them because it must be much more interesting. But what happened, they put me purposely in this group so that I could hear the stories of the people, very, very poor people, and what they had to deal with day in and day out. The struggles, the stories of, you know, the violence in their neighborhoods, the stories of police brutality, the stories of, oh my God, how nothing was working, how they could never get, you know, even if there was, they couldn't get the attention of the police, they couldn't get the attention of City Hall, they couldn't get the firefighters to come to put the fires out. It was just amazing to hear these stories. And also the stories of how they started to organize among themselves, you know, to drive people to the emergency rooms, you know, to stories of how they would line up, the parents in the mornings would line up on the route that kids walked to school so the kids could get to their schools safely. this, pastors who were, just, they were at their wits' end. So the stories that I was hearing were just phenomenal. And what happened was I came to see that I was in the right room and that I needed to listen, I needed to hear, I needed to learn. And I started being very grateful for where I was. So I just remember that even when they started in the training, there would be, the trainer would ask questions, and I was always the one, I was always shooting up my hand, I know the answer to that, I know where you're getting at. And the trainer would basically shoot me down and say, be quiet, let so-and-so answer. And I just remember there was a black woman that I was sitting next to, and she was living in, right around Temple University. She must have been 80 years old, I think. She was probably my age, but I always thought of her as being 80, Mrs. Higgs. And at one point, Mrs. Higgs reached over to me, she said, honey, don't let him do that to you. Don't let him put you down. Don't let him do that. And I said, yeah, but Mrs. Higgs, I'm not getting anywhere. And she said, don't let him do that. And I said, no. I said, so I developed a good relationship with Mrs. Higgs. But at the end of the 10-day training, I found that to be one of the most powerful experiences in my life. Poor people, their pastors, and the academics who were in the periphery, all praying together, praying for their children, praying for their pastors, praying for their congregations, praying for their neighborhood, singing together. And rabbis, Catholic pastors, Mennonites, Methodists, it probably was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. I'd never been in a gathering like that. Different races, different classes, different political persuasions. So we returned to Philadelphia, and again, now ready to do this wonderful research, only to find out when I returned that the Cardinal Bevilacqua, called the Catholic pastors in of the 5 inner-city Catholic parishes and told them that they could not be part of this new organization that was forming. And the name we gave the organization was Philadelphia Interfaith Action. And the Cardinal said that you do not need to join another organization, that the Catholic Church in Philadelphia had plenty of social services. They could work through the social services. They didn't need to belong to this organization of Mennonites and Baptists and on. And that, and moreover, that if they in fact joined the organization, that their parishes were going to be closed. So he threatened them, And so they couldn't do anything. They couldn't, because they were fighting for the lives of their congregations. So now, Will, it's 5 after 4. Tell me how much I have to go. Still have a little bit of time? 15 minutes, okay. Move it. No, do it. Okay. So he told them they couldn't be members of the congregations. They couldn't be members of PIA. So several of the Catholics got together and we said, so what are we going to do, roll over and play dead? And we said, no, we're not going to roll over and play dead. You can't join an IAF organization. You can't join it as an individual. You had to join it as a collective, like a congregation, like a church, right? Or like an agency. So we formed our own agency, and we called ourselves the Roman Catholic Caucus. And so we joined. And so at the opening event, we were there. We weren't, Philadelphia Catholic churches, but we were the Roman Catholic Caucus. And each member of an IAF organization pays money, so we had to raise dues. So let me just, I think what I'm going to have to do is skip through a lot of this stuff. The Industrial Areas Foundation was founded by Saul Alinsky, and you may have a chance to learn more about Alinsky's life. Alinsky was trained by John L. Lewis in labor organizing, and he was a very effective organizer. But what Alinsky came to was labor organizing is important, but it was communities that needed to learn how to organize. And so he is considered to be the father of community organizing. So community organizing is different from labor organizing. So communities needed to learn how to organize and to amass power, to improve life and dignity in their neighborhoods. So community organizing. And so Alinsky came up with some Alinsky started, wanted to create community organizations across the United States. And he organized first in Chicago, he organized in New York, he had organizations in California, but he came up with certain principles of community organizing. The first is power, that what poor communities lack is power. And in order to improve lives in their communities and improve their communities, they needed to amass power. And in very poor communities, power comes from two sources: organized people and organized money. The poor don't have a lot of money, but they have some money, but they do have a lot of people. So organized people and organized money. Second principle was that people will join a community organization if they see it is in their own interest. They don't come to an organization, they don't stay in an organization out of altruism. They will join an organization if it is, in fact, addressing their interests. And what are the interests of many poor people? They want to stay alive. They want their kids to stay alive. They want their kids to be safe. They want their kids to have playgrounds and libraries, and they want supermarkets, and they want banks, and they want good schools, and on and on. Their interest is, they truly are interested in life and dignity for themselves and for their families. He also saw that anger is important, but he talks about anger in terms of cold anger. And he would often say that in order to organize effectively, you have to rub raw the wounds of discontent. Because what happens is poor people become very content. It's not like they're content, but they're not, but they need to become angry about the situation so that they will not tolerate it any longer, that it becomes unacceptable. So organizing, community organizing, is essentially that of generating anger. Legitimate, just anger. But it's not the kind of anger that's explosive. It's controlled anger. It's directed anger. And Alinsky would call it cool anger, not hot anger. Also, change. You cannot have change without friction. For Alinsky, friction means movement. And so confrontation, conflict, what else? I can't remember the other words, are essential for change. So friction is essential for change. Okay? Compromise. He says, for the world to become the way we want it, we have to work with the world as it is. And so real choices need to be made. You're not going to get the best of possible worlds, but you can, and maybe we would love to strive for what is best, but maybe what we need to be striving for is what is least bad. And the other thing he said was that all organizing is relational. And this is very important. One of the basic principles of organizing, all organizing is relational. I always thought that what you go for are the issues, but the community organizing, especially the community organizing influenced by Alinsky, is all about relationship building, because Alinsky argued that what you're trying to build are organizations, and once you have an organization in place, that the organization needs to be strong enough to take on lots of issues, like safety, or like jobs, or like schools, or like abandoned cars, or like ineffective policing. I can tell you we did a lot. I stayed with PIA for 12 years. I would say I was the leader of the Roman Catholic Caucus, okay? And my work with them was principally in terms, I guess it was learning to listen. I wasn't in charge in the least. I think one of the silliest things that ever happened was one of the, they call them actions. So it was a mass meeting with the mayor, and the inner city, I mean, the mass meetings were like, I mean, they were dramas, really dramas. They were fantastic. I mean, you had the congregations there, and you had music, and you had the pastors standing up and speaking to the mayor and making demands. And but one of the things was one of the pastors who was supposed to be speaking, he was a Baptist pastor. He was very fiery, and he had to be away when for a week before the action. And so he asked me if I would write his speech, and I said, sure, you know, no problem, I'll write his speech. So one of the funniest things was I wrote his speech, and he started speaking what I wrote, and it sounded like Toton coming through the mouth of this fiery Baptist pastor, and it was such an embarrassment. It was like, oh my God, total embarrassment, because he's, you know, just the way I'm speaking, he's speaking, you know, and that's not the way he speaks. So it was, I realized, you know, that that's not my role in this organization. So what would I do? Basically, I wound up, what they asked me to do was to do press. And so I didn't write the press releases because they said my press releases were too long and nobody would ever read them. So as you know, when I write, it's like always has to be from the beginning of time to the end of time. And so they said, that's not a press release. They would write the press releases. But what I would do is I would get on the phones. I would call the networks. I would call the newspapers. And I would say to them, we're having this action. This is who's going to be here. We need you here to cover it. Because what you really want, if you have an action, whether it's a mass meeting with the police commissioner, or whether it's with the mayor, or whether it's police commissioner, mayor, whether it has to do with housing issues, what you want is you want the press to be there. I mean, number one, you want turnout. That's my job. One of my jobs was turnout, okay? So I never do an event on campus now, nothing, without good turnout. I work on turnout. You got to be there. Because what's the point if nobody turns up? I mean, people will say, oh, it's a quality event. It's not quantity, it's quality. BS. It's turnout. You want people there. So my job would be turnout. So what we would do was we would work, when we have this mass action, we would work on turnout. And every member of PIA would commit to turning out. At this meeting, we're going to have 75. We commit ourselves, 75. And then when the planning meeting, they say 75? What about 100? So we all, you know, 100. Catholic caucus, how many? 150. But you know, so you commit and you say, oh my God, how do I produce 150 people? But so then you work on getting 150 people. And in these mass meetings, we would, and they were usually held at a church, we would have the sign, there's a Roman Catholic caucus, Mennonites, what would be West Philadelphia Mennonites, Harold O. Davis Memorial Baptist Church, St. Gabriel's Episcopal Church, St. Luke's Episcopal Church. So we'd have these signs, big signs. And when you started the meeting, you had to go up and say, hi, I'm Sue Toton from the leader in the Roman Catholic caucus. I promised 150, and I came up with 75. And everybody go, boo, you know. Or if you said 150 and I came up with 165, it was yay. But it was a way of showing ourselves, to ourselves, what we looked at, how diverse we, racially diverse, economically diverse, congregationally diverse, to the mayor, to the police commissioner, oh, this is bugging around me, and to the press who was there. So you turn out, you're here, and we're in solidarity, and we're making demands. And the demands are that we're not getting, that the streets are not safe, and we want community policing. We want the police to be in relationship with the neighborhood. We want them to know the people in this neighborhood. So when they come in and they respond to a call, they don't do something stupid, like shoot the wrong person, you know? Or handcuff somebody and throw them in jail, and it's, you know, it's the pastor's son. You know, it's like, you don't do that. So we wanted to build a relationship of police with community. I mean, I can talk about, let me just give you, I'll give you some, we always did actions with humor, okay? It was really important because we had fun. And one of the pastors, one of the Episcopal pastors died about a month ago, and I went to her funeral. All of us were there at her funeral. And the eulogy was all about these stories that we told, and they were funny stories. So I'm going to give you one example, and this was not from PIA. This is from one of our sister organizations in New York. So let's see. I guess I'll pick two stories. One is supermarkets. So in poor neighborhoods, you have crappy supermarkets, right? You have meat that's moldy. You have freezers where the ice cream is melting. You have the vegetables and the fruit that's rotting. So the community was saying, we want a good supermarket. We want a decent supermarket. We're paying good money and we're getting this. So they organized, and they decided that they were going to shame the supermarket manager. Okay? And of course it was part of a supermarket chain. So they had supermarket inspectors. Okay? So these are people from the local community, members of this was East Brooklyn congregation. They had badges. And they said, EBC supermarket inspectors. I don't know, let's just call it was giant inspectors, okay? So they alerted the supermarket manager that the inspectors were going to be coming on Saturday morning. They also alerted the press that the inspectors were going to be there. They also alerted the police that the inspectors were going to be there. So what do? So they come bright and early Saturday morning with shopping. They take a shopping cart. And what they do is they go around and they pick out the worst vegetables and fruits, the rotting things with the mold and the worms coming out. They put them in the shopping carts. And then they go to the meat counter, and then they go to the freezer, and they pile it up. All of a sudden, the manager of the supermarket's coming out and says, no, 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 you don't want that. You want this. Here, let me get you a better cut of meat. Let me do this. Let me do. And they said, no, this is what we want. So, okay, so then the manager gets bent out of shape, and he says, you know, I'm going to call the police, and because you guys are disrupting. And so they said, don't worry, the police are out there already, because we called them because we didn't want to be pushed. You know, they didn't want to be pushed around, shoved around, et cetera. So police are out there. So he goes out and he sees the police cars. And so we said to him, listen, we want you, you're the first of, let's say, 4 or 5 supermarkets that we're targeting. You're a manager. And we want you to come, what we want from you is we want you to come to a meeting next Tuesday in one of the churches. And we're going to give you a contract to sign. And the contract that you're signing is that you're going to keep faith with this community, that it's good money, as good as any rich person's money. And we want the quality of the produce to improve, the meats to improve, et cetera. And we're going to keep monitoring. But we want you to sign this contract that you, in fact, will ensure that the food that you are selling to this community is worthy, is decent food, is good, worthy of the dignity of these people. So let's just say 5 managers show up Tuesday night, right? And one of the pastors is sitting in the front with a big gavel, and he bangs the gavel, and he says, I don't know, Joe Schmo from Giant, come forward. And so Joe Schmo comes forward, and he says to him, will you sign this agreement? Joe Schmo signs the agreement, and then you get another one, you get another one, you get another one. Okay. Now, so the deal is they've signed this contract now with the community, okay, to deliver goods that are decent. And so so it's covered in the press. They signed the contract, right? It's in the press now. And so then they started to monitor the improvement over time. That's just one example. But what I'm trying to say to you is that it's basically what Gustavo Gutierrez was saying, and that is that, you know, community organizing and community organizations are empowering poor people to act in their own name, to reclaim what belongs to them. Safety in the streets, decent food, decent housing, decent schools for their kids. And they learn, in the process of community organizing, they learn how to hold public officials accountable for their action, businesses accountable for their action. And they learn to be in relationship, how to be in relationship and stay in relationship with these very powerful people in their communities. Because what poor people know, what they have found in the past, is their phone calls are not returned. Their requests for meetings are not met. They are treated as if they are non-people, as if they don't matter, as if they don't exist. And this is an effort to reclaim their dignity, to reclaim their lives, to reclaim their voice. And so solidarity, they build solidarity among themselves, which is amazing, solidarity among churches, solidarity with dioceses, solidarity with the police, amazing, with police, with the Commissioner for Housing, solidarity with the mayor. They're basically creating an opportunity for public officials to do the right thing, to making it possible for them to make the right choices, to protect their public servants, to protect the lives of people in these neighborhoods. And so I learned what I learned. I had a very small role to play. But my posture was one of, what do you need from me? It was a sense that I want to be part of this effort. I want to be with you. I want to stand with you. I want to learn from you. I want to be taught by you. I want to be enlisted in any way that you need me. And what did it involve? It involved an awful lot of time on my part, a lot of meetings, going into very dangerous neighborhoods, making lots of phone calls, showing up at actions. My family, I got my kids to, lick envelopes. And it wasn't at times convenient for me. It really wasn't. When you were needed, you had to be there. And so that's what I learned, that solidarity does not fit neatly into, your time when you can possibly do it. You go when you're needed, you do what is needed, you make time for it. So, that's my experience. Great. That's what it was. So, okay. Oh, you don't have to. Okay. Way over time. I skipped over a lot of material.
What'd you skip?
Huh?
That's my question.
What did I skip? Oh, I skipped a lot of stories. I skipped a lot of the training. Yeah, and a lot of stories. The stories were wonderful. The people I came to know were just extraordinary human. Oh, that's what I skipped. That's what I really skipped. When I came back to Villanova, what I really, in being with this organization, you started to see what really mattered. It wasn't the number of books I published. It wasn't my name in lights. I would see such wimpy faculty, and such wimpy, faculty administrators. I saw very, very poor people with amazing courage, amazing integrity, amazing leadership. And there were times here at Villanova that I was embarrassed for my own faculty, and I just said, I almost felt like saying, "You wimps," and you really see what really matters. These are people who are fighting for their lives and for the kids' lives. Yeah, so puts it all in perspective. Yeah. Taylor.
How do you reconcile the Catholic social teaching principle of subsidiarity, which often has very slow approaches to change, to a sense of urgency that's tied with so many social justice issues?
This is subsidiarity. This is people acting in their own name. And as I was saying, being enlisted. And the role of the church, as I see it, is to support their efforts. It's not to lead. The institution is there to, so how can we be you're doing servant leader, how can we lend our institutional weight to your effort for safety, for keep these buildings from falling down and killing people, for decent school? How how can we be, how can the institutional power of this church be enlisted in this effort? You're driving the effort. How can we be part of it? And the urgency, the sense of urgency, I think with the power of these institutions behind this organizing effort, the urgency is, it gives a greater sense of urgency. See, the problem is that the police, the mayor, commissioner of housing, they don't see this as urgent. This is just poor people being shot. This is just buildings falling down. This is just fires. They don't get the sense of urgency. So subsidiarity and the sense of urgency, I think, go hand in hand. I really do. So, yeah. And that's why I was saying, for me, it was urgent. When they needed me there, it was urgent. I had to show up, Yeah.
How was the urgency generated in some ways other than a natural crisis? But, how did, you said rubbing the wounds, or how in an organizing capacity do you generate urgency?
Well, I mean,
The cool anger as well.
Yeah, the cool anger. Well, poor people to also settle, and so it's, let me give an example. I'm trying to think. Okay, so one of the churches, Harold O. Davis Memorial Baptist Church, it's right near Urban Bridges and Cook Middle School, where some of you tutor. Okay, so they had a preschool, and what the families noticed was that their kids were getting sick. A lot of kids were out, were getting migraines, and and the thing is to say, okay, so poor kids are getting sick, okay, but it just became more and more poor kids were getting sick, who were playing in this churchyard. So then what you've got to do is they're getting sick, and what we were thinking is we wouldn't be a bit surprised if that soil was contaminated, and it was. So then it just becomes, this is intolerable that these kids are getting sick, these kids are staying out of school, parents can't take off from work, they don't have. So then it's like, okay, if this is happening, then how do we get the soil tested? So we wanted to get the Army Corps of Engineers in to do the test. So we bring the Army, we bring the Army Corps of Engineers in. Okay, so then you find out there's high levels of arsenic, and mercury in the soil. So then, okay, so now you have the study done. Well, how do you get anybody to do anything about it? So the mayor. So again, how do you get the mayor to do something about this? The mayor isn't returning phone calls, So we said, okay, so the mayor's not coming to us, we're going to go to the mayor. So what we did was we took these baggies of the contaminated soil to the mayor's office. And so you get the press, and you bring, so how do you do that? Well, it's like the rubbing of the wounds is that, it's the congregations, it's people saying, this is intolerable, we're not going to stand for it any longer, we're going to organize, we're going to make an issue of it that wasn't an issue. So we took baggies and we have photographs of all these baggies in the mayor's reception room. The press is there, and so finally the mayor, he's hiding behind the doors. He finally agrees to meet with them. So we don't take too many baggies in. You can take, a couple baggies in. We even had one situation where the buildings were collapsing, and we took bricks to City Hall with the numbers of all the buildings that were collapsing, and they wouldn't let us bring the bricks into the mayor's. This is with John Street so we had the bricks outside. So finally, the mayor agrees to meet with us, so we could take one brick in with one number on, but when you say rubbing the wounds, what happens is that as you start to organize, there becomes less of a sense that this is tolerable, that it wouldn't be tolerable in King of Prussia or in Valley Forge with buildings collapsing and killing people or contaminated soil, so it shouldn't be there. So it's this agitation that You know, we've just become so complacent that agitation isn't there, that intolerance isn't there, and it's building that. And it's trying to convey to those stupid leaders that something has to be done with it, you know? Because you're only poor, you only live in North Philadelphia, you know? You're nothing to me. And they weren't.
Would you think solidarity is possible when you can't physically be there?
Well, some of my work, I think you have to be there. I think part of it is turning out, being there. But also a lot of the solidarity that I did, I never thought of it, I never talked about it as solidarity, and probably people would look at me like, what are you talking about? It was making those phone calls, was doing the turnout, was getting the press, you know, so that it was all a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of work behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So, but for me, it was really also important to turn out, to be there. Now, the one thing I did want to tell you is I really think that if you're serious about solidarity, being in solidarity, I really think that you can't do it alone. It has to be through an organization. Maybe not through a community organization, maybe through Bread for the World, maybe there are organizations there, you don't have to start anything. And I think you need to find an organization that you believe in and can be part of. And that's when you learn about these issues, and that's when you get into relationships with people. And that's, you know, then you begin, I guess for me what I saw how much evil there was, how much resistance to good there was, especially by public officials. I also saw, I mean, it gave me a new understanding of what community is, what truth is, what grace is. I learned what the church is. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about any possible challenges that you've had, which you mentioned a little bit, with building relationships with the community organizers from Philly, specifically with regards to
me?
Kind of that acknowledgement of the power differences between yourself and
I got over it.
the people that you work with.
I got over it. You know, we're so full of ourselves. I mean, I think it comes with being well off, financially well off, and also with being an academic, you have a title and you have some books under your belt, you know, that you published, and, you know, people treat you with respect around here, you know, too much respect almost sometimes. So you expect, you know, when you go in there that you're going to be treated the same way, or, you know, deference. And for me, I had to let go of all of that. And it wasn't hard because I had so much to learn. I had so much to learn from the community. I learned so much from the organizers, who sometimes were pretty arrogant toward me, but I really learned from them. And so it was an education. It was an education on lots of levels, the intellectual level, the emotional, spiritual level, etc. Yeah, I think my one frustration was here at Villanova, I really had hoped either that the Center for Peace and Justice Education, now this is long, way before your time, that the Center for Peace and Justice Education would have joined PIA. And I had also hoped, we approached the president to see if Villanova would join PIA, you know, years ago. And what the president told us was that Villanova was embarking on a capital campaign and they wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. And the Center for Peace and Justice, you know, they really saw it as just one organization among many organizations. There really wasn't the interest in it. We tried very hard, but we didn't get anywhere. So that was frustrating. I would have given my life to have had students, the Center for Peace and Justice, at least the Center for Peace and Justice, be part of this organization. You would have learned so much. It would have been wonderful. It would have transformed the center, I think, but didn't happen. That was frustrating.
Was it difficult to achieve solidarity among the larger, like Philadelphia Interfaith Action, when you had like all the different groups as part of it? Like when you were all broken up, like you said in meetings, like you kind of separated into like groups?
Oh, we did that to identify ourselves, but no, we worked with one another. Reverend Kaufman, Fred Kaufman, who came and gave that talk on gun violence for the theology, I don't know what it was called, Colloquium on Gun Violence. Fred Kaufman is a West Philadelphia Mennonite pastor. And, you know, I worked with Fred, Reverend Mary Laney, the Episcopal priest, front in the Boulevard, St. Gabriel's Episcopal Church. No, the neat thing about it was, see, these congregations basically work in isolation from one another. Reverend Laney didn't know Reverend Miller from the Church of the Advocate, or Reverend Kermit Newkirk, who was just 3 blocks down the street from him. They work in isolation. They never knew one another. And so now they're working with one another, really, and we're talking about battles, major battles, you know, with the police. We got rid of the police commissioner. We literally got rid of the former police commissioner. He was corrupt, and he wasn't doing his job. And so you work together, you strategize together, you plan your actions together, you plan the big action, the mass action together, so you learn, and you pray together. And I met so many, and there's still, I mean, I don't see them often now, but, you know, at Mary Laney's funeral, we all were there. And I mean, there's, you know, solidarity. I mean, there's a bond that was formed, you know, and it was formed in the struggle for justice. And some of the I'm talking about the pastors, but the members of the congregations that were working with, I mean, they were just incredible. Mrs. Higgs, when they put up the Nehemiah homes, we got her in the bulldozer, you know, so she learned how to drive, because the mayor wanted to be in the bulldozer. We said, no way are you going to be in this bulldozer. So we were bulldozing the land to put up this affordable housing in West Philadelphia. So we said we wanted Mrs. Higgs there. Here's 80-year-old Mrs. with a hard hat, and she's pulling these gears. And it's just thrilling. Because what you're talking about is you're talking about rebuilding a community. You're talking about building life, restoring life in this community. And that's it. And so it's physical. We call them Nehemiah houses. So it's the rebirth of communities. So, and it was just very, I mean, we had one action where we were blessing a mailbox, you know? I mean, you don't have mailboxes anymore, but West Philadelphia, what was that center? It was a Catholic center in West Philadelphia. It was an art center. Sister Helen David was the art teacher there, and they didn't have a mailbox in their neighborhood. So we worked with the city to get a mailbox. Well, this is really important. And so we would have a blessing of the mailbox. It was great. It was awesome, you know. You don't have mailboxes now, you don't appreciate it. We also we blessed a street light. You know, there was a street crossing where kids were getting killed going across the street. There was no street light there. And we worked to get a street light. And you bet we blessed that, because that was saving kids' lives. So it was fun. It was work, but it was fun. A lot of fun.
What was the name of the organization, IPA?
The major organization, and they still do training, is the Industrial Areas Foundation. It's a weird name, Industrial Areas Foundation. And they're based in Chicago now. Their office is in Chicago. And it's a profession. Community organizing is a profession. You can actually make a good living. Our organizer in Philadelphia was making more than, she was making more than I was making. What's neat about the IAF is they do excellent training of their organizers, and they stay with you. The training, the leadership training, is done on the job. So you learn how to be a leader by being a leader, by doing it. And the organizers learn. So the IAF, Industrial Areas Foundation, and they have some of the strongest organizations that they have are in New York City, very strong one in New York City. I'd recommend it.
What was the name of the leader who started, like the founder?
Saul Alinsky. He wrote 2 books. Wasn't a good writer. One was called Reveille for Radicals and Rules for Radicals. It's not these, you know, they're little books, teeny books, but they were bestsellers.
They're in our library, our campus ministry library, right down the hall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And during dinner, we have some YouTube clips from a film that Dr. Toton has on him. So dinner together if that's something people are interested in. Even just the first 13 minutes cover a lot of him.
But I always tend to be very respectful, and you know that I try to be, and it's very hard, and people who have no power in the communities, they too are very respectful toward authority, and it's very hard to learn to be confrontational and and make demands and.
One of the things the students had organized, Kevin was the head of this, to do activist training. What are some of the things you think Villanova could benefit from, or some of the obstacles to getting to that sort of place of empowerment?
Training?
Just anything, like what's your take on?
I think you need to be trained. I mean, I'm not answering your question directly. I actually think that I think the Center for Peace and Justice Education, the student activists, so-called activists, I think they could use training. I think that they could use training and organizing. And I don't know if the IAF would come in and do training, might, but there are other community organizations that I was telling you about that are related to, that are spin-offs of the IAF, who have actually said to me that, we really would be happy to come in. I think you should have a course on organizing. I do. And I also think that it would be very good to have an organizer come in and to train you to do your organizing, to be more effective organizers on campus. Yeah, to learn how to build relationships, learn how to, some of the things that you've been doing, like with fair trade and a lot of, students can, if you want to make change, if you want to change Villanova, and I'm really talking about significant change. What you're going to have to do is identify what do you want changed? Where are you disrespected? And then you have to learn how to get that respect and how to affect change. Yeah, Christina DiBerdino, what was her name? She worked on fair trade.
Russell.
Who was it?
Yeah.
With Russell.
Yeah. She was really good. Now, I don't know where she learned some of her tactics, but she was excellent. I was so proud of her, really proud of her. She's in law school now, I think. So training, you're going to have to pay for it. Not a couple thousand, but you're going to have to pay for it. And I think any course that you would take would also have action as integral to it. Be fun. Ooh. Watch out, Father Donahue. Watch out.
I guess my question is just what advice would you have for college students who do some sort of service, whether it be a break trip or a learning community? How do you go about after that, continuing to live in solidarity? How do you invest yourself into the lives of people you serve?
I think you have to join an organization.
Okay.
I think you have to, whether it's a campus organization, you have to join. I'm a member of Bread for the World, but there are plenty of organizations that are addressing trafficking or organizations addressing hunger or homelessness, and I just think you join the organization and you stay active. You become active in it. You learn. You have to join. You have to be a part of something. Yeah, and you'll grow. Yeah, can't do it on your own. Jenna?
Do you think that solidarity can be a state of mind, or does it have to be relationship based? If you are passionate about something and so want to be in solidarity with people on an issue you're taking action on, is that enough? Or do people need to physically know that you're in solidarity, that you specifically are in solidarity with them to be in solidarity?
I think both, Jenna. I think that I think action is really a key element of it. Action is absolutely essential, but reflection is as well. And I think that your frame of mind has to change, and it will change. I think it is. I come the other way. I come from, if you are engaged in action, the action then will force you to reflect. And so the other day I was in a meeting. I was actually doing graduate comprehensive, her graduate exams. And the student we were examining, the graduate student we were examining, I could not understand what she was saying. And And I said, I basically said, tell me concretely what, I think very concretely. And for me, and this really showed me how my thinking has changed, I have to think globally. I can think locally, but I need to think globally. And what I realized at that moment was, it was really what Ignacio Ellacuría was saying, that if you want to understand a situation and what is demanded of it, you need to place yourself in the most extreme situations. So my mind in that extreme situation. So I can't remember what she was talking about, but immediately went to a global example, and that global example helped me to understand what is actually the dynamics of what is going on, and then I understood better what needs to be addressed and what is demanded of us. So what I'm getting at is that when you were talking, it's what happens is you find your consciousness changing. You find that, and it's what Ellacuría says, that we need to think from the feet of the crucified people, that I really am finding that my thinking actually it is starting or begins at a different place, which is interesting because I never reflected on it, but that's actually what's happening. So as you become more drawn in and more engaged, what you find is that your thinking starts to change and you start to reflect from a different place. Yeah, I don't know if that's answering what you were looking for.
Yeah, can I follow up on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you, like, once you started to like change your thinking and like shifted your worldview a little bit, can you be in solidarity with a person, a community, an organization if they don't know who you are, or if they don't know your name? Like, if they don't know that you exist, can you be in solidarity with them?
I don't know. Well, so I would hope that I'm in solidarity with the hungry of the world. I would hope. Do I know their names right now? No, I don't. Do they know me? No. It gets, for me, Jenna, it's gotten to the point where I do things because they need to be done, because there's work to be done, it's needed, I can do it, I do it. It's not helping a whole lot, but it was much easier. I think it's much easier when I was working with PIA, because I knew the people, I knew it was very tangible, yeah. But you know, the other thing is that I think that my community is bigger. Like, it's not necessarily, the people that I am in relationship with, I may not see very often. You know, it's broader. It's like across the globe. It's all across the globe, yeah. So the community is bigger. Mm.
That helps a lot.
Yeah.
I like struggle with that all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, really, really hard. 75 minutes. How many minutes? Yeah. So we're done? You're good? Okay. Thank you for listening. thank you very much for listening. And if I can be of any help to you at all, if you're interested in organizing, I can get you in touch.